A histogram is a graphical display that groups data into interval ranges. The histogram on your screen shows the heights of trees, and you'll notice that each height is represented in bar diagrams, but each bar does not represent just one height. Instead, it represents an interval of heights. For example, this bar represents a height that is between 150 and 200 centimeters. So I can see that there are 30 trees that have heights between 150 and 200 centimeters. When we're making a histogram, it's important that we have our bars that touch because our intervals should be next to each other, and our bars should be even, and our intervals should also be even, which is why our bars are even, because they show that they are equal intervals. Now, to make a histogram, the first thing that we start out with is a frequency table. The frequency table will help us determine how to split up our data into intervals. For this data, I can see that my lowest number is in the 40s and my highest number is in the 70s. So those are not very far away from each other, so it might be a good idea to use an interval of 5 for this data. So I'm going to distribute this by 5s, and I'm using intervals of 40 to 44 and 45 to 49. Now, it doesn't seem as if these are intervals of 5. It looks at first glance like those are intervals of 4, but if we count 40, 41, 42, 43, and 44, that's actually an interval of 5 numbers. So each of these is an interval of 5, and we're going to determine how many numbers we have in our data set for each interval. So let's start with 40 to 44. If I look in my data set, I'm going to stop at any number that is between 40 and 44. And so far I don't have any. And so far I have none. So there would be 0 numbers here that are between 40 and 44. So now let's look for numbers between 45 and 49. Well, I don't have any in my first 2 rows, but in my last row, I have 46, 49, 46, and 48. So that is 4 numbers that are between 45 and 49. Now we're going to look for numbers between 50 and 54. So between 50 and 54, I see that I have 53, 51, 50, 53, 50, and 52. Now that is a frequency of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are 6 numbers that occur between 50 and 54. Now we're going to look for any number between 55 and 59. So I don't see any in my first row, but then in my second row, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this was from my previous. So I know that there are 8 numbers between 55 and 59. So now I'm going to cross them out so that I don't get confused later. And next I'm going to look for numbers between 60 and 64. So I see this is between 60 and 64, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 temperatures between 60 and 64 degrees. And next we're going to look for 65 to 69. Well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 between 65 and 69. And finally, we're going to find any number between 70 and 74. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 between 70 and 74. Now we're going to take these values and we are going to represent them on a frequency table. When we're making a frequency table, it's just like making a bar diagram, except that when we go to write our numbers on our x-axis, these are going to be written in intervals instead of one number. So for 40 to 44, there were 0 temperatures, so I'm not going to draw a bar there. For 45 to 49, there were 4, so I'm going to go from here to 4 and put a bar to represent 45 through 49. For 50 to 54, there were 6, Now these bars should be touching because my intervals are right next to each other, and I try to make them equally wide. For 55 to 59, that number should be 8. So I'm going to come over here and make a bar that goes up to 8. For 60 to 64, that number is 5, so I make a bar that goes to 5. For 65 to 69, that number is 4, so I make a bar that goes to 4. And for 70 to 74, that number is also 4, so I make another bar that goes to 4. Now let's analyze a histogram. This histogram shows the annual rainfall for different cities. And we want to know how many cities have an average rainfall between 34 and 36 inches. Well, let's look. When I look down here, I see that 34 is here and 36 is here, which means this bar represents 34 to 36. So to figure out how many cities that is, I'm going to go to the top, and I notice that it's right here in between 6 and 8. That means that there are 7 cities that have a rainfall between 34 and 36 inches. Now, how many cities have an average rainfall between 32 and 36 inches? Well, 32 is here and 36 is here, so that means I'm looking at 2 bars. I know that this one was 7 because we already found it, so let's figure out what 32 to 34 is. So 32 to 34 is right here at 6, so there are 6 cities between 32 and 34, and there are 7 cities between 34 and 36, which means to find the total between 32 and 36, we can add 6 plus 7 and get 13. Now, how many cities have less than 32 inches of rainfall? Well, 32 is right here, so everything less than that is to the left. That means if I look, there are actually 3 bars that have annual rainfalls that are less than 32 inches. So let's look at our first one, which is 30 to 32. There are 4 cities that have an annual rainfall of 30 to 32 inches. Then for 28 to 30 inches, I see that there are 2 cities. And for 26 to 28 inches, I see that it's right here between 2 and 4, which means that it is 3 cities. So to find out how many cities have an annual rainfall of less than 32, I'm going to take these 3 bars, the amounts for these 3 bars, and I'm going to add them together. So 3 plus 2 plus 4 gives me 9. So there are 9 cities that have less than 32 inches of rainfall. Now, how many cities receive an average rainfall of at least 34 inches? This word at least is very important here. When we see at least, that means it can be 34 or it can be more than 34. So that means we're looking for everything from 34 higher. Well, if I look on my graph, there are 2 bars that represent 34 and higher. I already know that this one has 7 cities, so let's look at this one. This one goes up to right here, which is 3. So there are 3 cities that have a rainfall between 36 and 38 inches. So to figure out how many have a rainfall of at least 34 inches, I'm going to add 7 plus 3 to get a total of 10 cities.